Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L, and now it is time for the My Hero Academia chapter 222, the impressions video that is titled a review because that's what YouTube likes it being titled more. Oh wow, groupthink. Anyway, yeah, here we are, chapter 222. So, because of the title of the video, let's just do a very quick recap of that part first before launching into the rest of the chapter, mostly because I'm very interested in this whole topic of Shigaraki's origins and finding out where Shigaraki got all the hands from. I'm fully into it. So as we found out in this chapter, we got to see, well, you know, who the hands belong to and where they might have come from. We know that the doctor was the one that went and collected the hands and put them on those little gadgets, I guess to preserve them. We know that they are Shigaraki's family members' remains. We get the whole flashback of what happened that day. We got to see Shigaraki's pet dog. That one kind of hurt me, but the parts that really hurt me, we get to see some of Shigaraki's family members, and I'll try to clean up this image when I put it on the video. But the one that really broke my heart, because like in this panel of people that Shigaraki hurt, you can kind of see his father, you can see what looks like to be his mother, and then you see a tiny child, and that part really hurts. Shigaraki dusted his own sister. That's what or you know, maybe a small cousin, but most likely his sister. That is tragic. Now, I do wonder though, because he dusted his own sister, I've never seen Shigaraki have a pair of small hands holding on to him. I don't see it. So, I don't know. Anyway, we should probably assume that there's grandparents involved too, given that Shigaraki has so many hands. But, yeah, that was something. Overall, I'm very interested in seeing, you know, how all that came about. But seeing this first bit of the chapter, you know, the whole Shigaraki kills his family and then All For One shows up. Seeing that just again reinforces the idea in me that this was all premeditated. Like, this was All For One's doing. All For One probably gave him the quirk. Like, the doctor says that the quirk was a sudden mutation, effectively, and it's like, nah, man. All For One knew what was going on. First off, let's just look back at the information we have. And I think I've mentioned this in another impression video, but All For One has definitely been keeping track of Nana's family. There's no way. Like, first off, Shigaraki's father was put into foster care. He was put up for adoption. He went to an orphanage and all that. And then All For One shows up all of a sudden when the grandson all of a sudden happens to develop a mutation. No, the guy was waiting. He watched this whole time. He probably made up this whole giant plan to have Shigaraki go out of control. Or, you know, just, you know, use his quirk for the first time and then have that not work out very well. And then he just came in and swooped in and got to be the hero because he created the whole situation. Like, that is so likely, given what we know about All For One, given that we know that he likes messing with people. That's totally likely. There is nothing serendipitous about this. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I have a sneaking suspicion that Shigaraki was quirkless. I do wish I made the video for this earlier, because then I'd have it on record, but I'll just make it in the next coming weeks, and then you guys can check out my rationale, because it's a bit iffy on the premise for why I think he's quirkless, or he was initially quirkless, but it's just something that's there. Anyway, I did greatly appreciate getting to see that whole first bit of how Shigaraki came to be in All For One's care, and I also liked the origins of the hands and who got the hands, and I also liked Shigaraki's introspection on his feelings, how he just has a gaping hole in his heart and how he doesn't really have memories. I do feel that Shigaraki's full picture memories, I feel like that might have a clue as to what happened that day in terms of if All For One was involved, because if Shigaraki got those memories back and All For One appeared earlier than he should have, then, you know, Shigaraki will know that there was direct tampering. But the real question in terms of Hero Academia is, will Shigaraki ever know the truth of what happened on that day? And is the truth as simple as being able to tell, oh yeah, All For One was definitely the villain here? Those are some of the bigger points, and I really don't see these points being answered until we're like in the final arc of Hero Academia. I really don't see that going there, because at this point we still don't know who the final villain's gonna be. We don't know if it's gonna be Shigaraki or if it's gonna be All For One. And the current narrative force between the two of them is like roughly equal. You can imagine a sequence of events where All For One ends up being the final villain because it's All For One, and you can imagine a sequence of events where Shigaraki ends up being the final villain because Hero Academia has a theme of inheritance in terms of its storyline. So if they're doing the inheritance storyline, Shigaraki ends up with the final villain moniker. So that's where we're kind of at, and at this point, you know, this is Shigaraki building his case for why he could be the final villain, or he could be the final ally. Like, he could be turned like at the last minute when All For One reveals all the shit that actually went down. So that's what this chapter really does for me a lot. It's giving Shigaraki, it's allowing him to put his personal philosophy out in the open. It's allowing him to say what exactly he wants. And now with this, someone was asking me to dissect the motives between the Liberation Army and Shigaraki's group, and how that could be, you know, what the differences are. And with this now, there's a clearer picture, so I will be making that video when I have time. It's just, there's a lot of videos that need to be made, and I do not have enough time, unfortunately. So just keep an eye on it. It'll probably be up, like, I'm giving that one like a 4-week time frame. Let's see if I get it to it earlier. Anyway, since we're at a bit of a lull in the video, let me just take the second to point out I was wrong last week. I did not understand something last week. I made a critical mistake last week that this chapter helps me see better. It's specifically in terms of the timeline. Last week I talked about Dobby and the Doctor having a pre-existing relationship, whereas this chapter establishes how they have the pre-existing relationship. So that was my bad. So my mistake. I did not read it well. Bad reading comprehension for me last week. Because last week we got to see the Nomus in the tubes, and one of them does look a lot like the Nomu that Dobby played with. And then this chapter, Dobby's talking about an ally. We most likely know who it is. It's most likely referring to Hawks. And then we effectively have Dobby and the Doctor going off to do their own thing. It's pretty much being set up in this chapter. So my bad. I did not factor in the month. I did not have the timelines in my head. I'm very happy that the chapter was able to elucidate that on its own. But yeah, let's just put that for the record. My bad. Speaking of that, speaking of bad reading comprehension, my reading comprehension this week is also very terrible. And so I would like to have your guys' opinions on 2 shots. So one of the first shots is this shot that we got with Shigaraki and his monologue, where you have like this wonderful image of people doing their lives and all kinds of things. You have Bakugo drumming, you have people playing around. And then you have like this really interesting shot. It's kind of in the black, and I don't recognize it. It makes me think like it's a Nomu, but I really don't recognize it. I don't know what this is. I don't know what that silhouette is. Do you guys have any ideas about the silhouette? You know, we also get to see a shot of Tartarus right above it, because that looks like Tartarus because it's on that bridge. So let me know. Like, that shot is surrounded by Stain and Tartarus, so it makes me feel like it's someone that's locked up in there, but I don't recognize the hairdo. It's kind of odd. And the next shot that I want your guys' opinions on is that final shot. So the way that the author has drawn it, it looks like it's a pile of flesh on first inspection, but I'm thinking, is this Girin's scarf? Because we know he wears a scarf. Is that his scarf with his little pinky on top of it, or his or like one of his fingers on top of it? Can you guys spot the finger? Like, you can kind of see that the author kind of obscured where the cut is. So let me know. Do you think that's a piece of cloth, or do you think that's a piece of flesh that the finger is resting on? I can't tell. But yeah, just let me know of that. Okay, cool. Okay, so going back into the chapter, you know, overall, I think it's a good chapter. I think it's great that we got exposition on Shigaraki's goals. I think it's great that Shigaraki thinks he's going to be charismatic. I think it's great that Shigaraki allowed for his allies to have their own goals within his goal. Like when Toga points out that she wants stuff, and Shigaraki's like, yeah, you know, I'll make exceptions for my allies because they're helping me out. That was actually very nice of him. I thought that was a very charismatic leader thing to do, so I really appreciate that. I don't know if this has really won Spinner over. But hey, by the end of the chapter, Spinner is still narrating, and, you know, it does... He does set things up, like things are going to get pretty wild pretty soon. And we get the chapter left off with the destruction of the League of Villains. That's pretty interesting. Will the League of Villains actually get destroyed? I don't know, man. Like, alright. we know how the author does for Hero Academia. We know that he likes to oversell things sometimes. The big one that I can remember is Izuku. And you know, this is my opinion, because I know some of you don't agree with this one. But I thought that the author oversold the Stain situation when Izuku talked about how bad the Stain arc was going to be in terms of the people. And like, everyone came out of that arc more or less okay. You know, like it's not the worst thing ever. Like in terms of like bigger impacts, All Might versus All for One was a much bigger impact. You know, okay, you know, not the point. The point is, you know, that's where I feel that sometimes the author makes it seem bigger. So when I see the destruction of the League of Villains, I'm already thinking, okay, author, how are you going to spin that? Are you saying that the League of Villains is going to be destroyed and like a phoenix rise from the flames as something more like the conglomerate of villains? Are you saying the League of Villains are going to become legal and they're going to take over like a building and now they're, I don't know, what's villains backward? Nihilive? Yeah, they're going to be Nihilive now? Then the Nihilive company, Nihilive, yeah, that's, I would see that. But yeah, no. One thing on narrative, specifically the way that things are being narrated at the end, and this is more of a talk about technicalities. It's not really anything else about the chapter. I always find it interesting when another character is narrating what is supposed to be Deku's story. Like, remember, like the chapter starts off, or sorry, the series starts off with, this is Izuku's story of how he became the greatest villain, and then you have, you know, Spinner coming in and telling his part of the story. It's been a long story and giving a feature presentation. This is just one of those things where I think having it like, you got to be careful when you have a narrative like that. And it doesn't matter in the long run, this is just nitpicking, but I don't think the framework of this is Izuku's story works really well when it comes to a manga with a lot of compelling characters. Because if you take it as being Izuku's point of view, there's just things that Izuku's eyes will never get to see. So like the structure itself already comes in with a kind of glaring weakness in terms of telling a story. Like, some people will go through with it and they will make this really compelling story where not knowing what's happening in the world around you adds a little bit of mystery, but it doesn't really work for manga that well. That said, like, there's nothing wrong with changing perspectives. Like, lots of books change perspectives all the time. But I think novels in general have better transitions for that kind of thing. But the point of this little talk is just, whenever we move into those areas where Izuku can't see, it's funny, just because you think about, okay, we're in the framework of Izuku's story, but this kind of has to be told, because Izuku's story, you know, just can't cover it by itself. I always find it funny. It's nothing else. It's interesting to see, you know, practicality versus the idea. Anyway, I still have a few thoughts about this chapter, but I'm still kind of developing them. I need to reread the chapter a few more times, maybe give it a few days, just to really make sure I fully understand all the implications coming out of this chapter. But overall, I liked it. I think it was a fun chapter. And I really did, I can't understate how much I loved seeing a nice, clear picture of what Shigaraki wants to accomplish. So guys, let me know what you thought down below. Let me know what you thought about those two images, and let's call it there. Till next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.